Greetings, everyone. This is Virtuous Roots, where we reclaim virtue to bring into our home and yours. And I'm Thomas McCuddy.
I'm Thomas Quackenbush.
I'm Nick Wiegand. And this conversation we're going to talk about today is the concept of raising self-governing children. And so I don't know about, I think we're going to have to kind of flesh out what we mean by self-governing children, and then as it progresses into adults. And I think the ultimate goal is adulthood. But like, where do we balance and where do we draw the line? So let's begin with just kind of defining what a self-governing child, like what even is that?
Well, the idea is you have a child that can regulate their own desires, their own passions. So they're the ones that are not going to eat too much food. They're going to do the things that they're supposed to do. They're going to shut the TV off when it's time. They're not going to play too long. That would be self-governing. That's self-regulation, that they would essentially have temperance, their own temperance. Now, the problem and what comes in with the question with parenting and families, how long and how much should the parent be over that and help the child regulate, and how much the extreme versions, we have a term for that. We call like the helicopter parent, who is constantly hovering, constantly making sure everything is proper and everything's right. So then you have the laissez-faire parent who just basically does whatever, Hakuna Matata, like just let them go, do whatever.
Feral children.
And you end up with either the feral children, or you end up with overly dependent kids who do not know how to regulate. Like they're entirely dependent on someone telling them. So the idea is there's a virtuous middle. There's a middle ground. And so the question is how to get there, because this is why some of the debate, like you may not be the full helicopter or full complete freedom, but knowing how to balance these kinds of things.
Right.
And it does become, for lack of a better word, a debate within parenting, because there's much disagreement. And there seems to be a struggle to find that middle ground. And since this is really about self-regulation is teaching a virtue, that's where this is kind of now some of our domain where we can speak to this a little bit. Because we know what we're looking for, but how to get there. And that becomes the question. Like we all agree we should want a child that knows how to do the right thing at the right time and is not completely led by their passions. That's what animals do. So how do you have a child? How do you parent? What's the in-between from the child that, as they're learning, because this is why Aquinas even referred to the issues of intemperance as the childish vices, because as children, we have to learn how to do this. We have to learn how to regulate. We have to discern what is good and then train ourselves to love what is good. So that is part of the process. But our issue is with parents, many times we don't know how. Are we being too permissive? Are we being too restrictive?
Yeah.
What does that look like, and how do we qualify and quantify that? So that's where this conversation really needs to go.
So I own a small construction company, and I've been doing a lot of hiring and firing. And young men want to come into construction. And I wish I was making this up, but a couple of weeks ago, I had a young man who was interested in a job, talked to my business partner. Business partner hands him my card, and his girlfriend calls me so he can get a job. And I was like, all right, well, have him send me an email and have him call me. And then she calls me again to follow up and calls me again. Needless to say, if he can't manage his own affairs and is dependent upon his girlfriend to get him a job, I'm not hiring him. And in the same vein, I've had a mother call me with a young man who wanted a job, and I told him he wasn't fit, and his mommy called me to find out why I didn't hire him. And I just responded with, well, the fact that you're calling me indicates why I would not do that. But on the other side of it, I have men who will work, and I can't tell them a thing. Like, they know what they're doing, supposedly. They never listen. They do what they want. They are feral adults who get fired also very quickly. And so we talk about this with children, but I think it's important that we understand our role as parents is to create, good, God-fearing, good members of society. And the problem is we go with these trends and we push out these just ridiculous people that cannot function in the real world.
Yeah, and because you notice it too, because especially it's like, because I grew up, my dad wasn't like present as much. I was with my mom, and I was a shy kid, and I was very shy and very introverted, and she would got into this habit, instead of forcing me to, or encouraging me to, talk and, to explain myself, she would always kind of talk for me.
Hmm.
And and that's one of those things, because the man, or whatever he is, a young boy that wants that job, they can't.
I mean, they're adults. They're
Yeah, no,
men.
that's why I'm trying to, like, he's an adult physically, but mentally, or like spiritually or whatever, he is not. And for me, like, I started to recognize that it came with, I think part of, we talked about this episodes ago, or about how a father's role is to push your kid, and put them in circumstances where they can kind of sink or swim a little bit. And one of the things I realized, because, like, so my son, my middle son, he doesn't like ordering food or like buying stuff. Like, he's all tough guy until he has something he wants to buy, and he was like, Dad, can you go up there? I don't know how to use a credit card scheme. I'm like, it's not that hard. I show him how to do it. I'm like, next time you're doing it. And next time when you want to go up there, like, he used to get like Subway sandwiches, and he gets anxious because he didn't like just this conversation. And there's people that do get anxious with those conversations, but I'm like, this is a good step for you to talk to a stranger that's preparing your food, and you telling them what you want, and owning that. Because if I did it every time, we're going to get somebody like that, that I'm going to have to call for jobs, or my wife has to call, my son needs a job. I'm like, well, he needs to go out there and do that himself.
Right.
And I think as we're thinking about this, because we're not trying to make, and we're also trying not to make, as the other extreme you talked about, we don't want them just to think that they have complete control, and like they're completely sovereign from anybody around them giving them advice, including like reading their scriptures and submitting to Christ, because they think that they know better than what God does. And I think a lot of kids are like that as well. So there's this as virtue, as Thomas brought up earlier, virtue is that middle ground between these two extremes, especially in parenting, because we can't, we have to be able to, not control, but also not completely just allow our kids to just do what they need to do, like whatever they want to do, and it's completely hands off.
So I'm going to read Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it.
Mm-hmm.
And the first word is the word train. It's not tell.
Mm-hmm.
It's not order. It's not let. It's to train.
Yep.
And if you look at any sport, training is about repetition. It's about building stamina. It's hard work to train yourself to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so if Scripture tells us to train up a child, I think we need to kind of like take that to heart, in that our job is to teach them what we want them to be, what God has called them to be. And I think it starts very young.
Yes.
I mean, very young.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I think the key is you start out with a little more helicoptering than some do, and then age appropriately, you allow them to take that next step and be a little bit more free and make the bigger mistakes. But I'm not going to let my 3-year-old walk out into traffic.
Yeah. Like, you're supposed to look both ways. It's like, why didn't you listen to me?
But I think that age is one factor, but I think also there's an element of the dispositions of the child.
Mm-hmm.
That this is where prudence comes in as a parent, that even though my child should be old enough that he should be able to regulate certain issues, he may not.
True.
And
Yeah.
and it may simply be because, and as we talk about the language of virtue, one of the things we're working with and working maybe against is the concept of nature and nurture. So we've talked in other times about the way the culture influences. Okay, so that's some of the nurture. That's some of the things that are being countered. But also we have this nature, and because we have a sin nature, we're sometimes born with the same way you might be born with a physical defect. We have spiritual defects.
Yes.
That some people are just born
Sure.
in a sin. So they're not vices because they haven't like they haven't rationally like leaned into those. They're just born with a disposition. That some are born with anger, or some are born with this intemperance, or some are born, and that becomes part of what you have to recognize as a parent, that some children might be born with a self-regulatory disposition. They might actually just be kind of good at this. The way some kids are born, and they're just so kind and so kind-hearted. Some are not. Okay, so we have to train. And that's why, as a parent, I think so many books, they try to offer a formula, and the formulas are a place to start and consider, but sometimes the formula just may not work. And that's why, as we think about, we get into real situations. So with my 15-year-old, we've been doing a lot of speech and debate tournaments, involves a lot of travel, and we're looking in the next 2 weeks, sending him on his first one by himself, which, again, I think about, I talked with my wife about it. I'm like, I was in middle school going off by myself.
When you say by himself, he will be with other
Okay, yeah,
adults.
He's not going
to make sure
he will not have a parent there. Yeah, to be clear.
he will not have you there. There will be other parents there.
My bad. Yeah, like we're just gonna fly him down to Georgia and be like, learn how to do Uber.
Good luck.
Good luck. Yeah.
You get an Uber.
No. So there is a sense, I look at it, and my wife reminded me that my parents were in many ways the opposite, where I've often joked in numerous occasions. We had 2 rules growing up in my house: don't make a life, don't take a life, and anything in between goes. So I was one of those where I didn't have any of that regulation. So I look at this, and I know that we're a homeschool family, I work from home, we're around our kids all the time. But I looked at this and I said, okay, we're going to send him with another family. And I'm thinking through a little bit. We know the family, we know the people that are involved, we know the situation. This is a Christian event. And I said, there's a few things I want to talk to him about. And I just want to lay some ground rules, because it is a co-ed event. I mean, there's going to be boys and girls there. So I said, I want to talk, and I want it to like actually walk through, not from the sense of even just him doing something, but what if someone tries something on him? And I told my wife, I said, I want to sit and have this conversation. Let's decide afterwards. And I sat and talked, and I realized, I think he's ready. Like, I feel confident sending him, that I'm not just like, well, let's just hope for the best. I feel like we've done the training, that this is an opportunity to go. And of course, we ask the question, well, what if something happens? Like, that becomes part of the training process. You have to be willing to let them go. You have to be willing that if they're going to learn construction, you've got to be willing that they're going to mess up the building, or they're going to mess up the furniture, or, they're going to, they're not going to do it right. There's going to be mistakes, but I don't feel like anything, it's a prudent decision to let them go, because I don't believe there's anything catastrophic that I have to necessarily worry about. Right. I recognize things can go wrong and stuff can happen.
I think one of the key words that you said is their disposition, because you've got 3 boys now. Your other ones are younger, and one thing that's like between siblings is like, well, you let so and so do this, or and we think as parents it's supposed to be fair. And I think many times that gets the idea of, well, if I let one do it, I have to let the other do it. And that's just not true.
That's not the definition of fairness.
Right. Well, and you say, and I want to make sure that that parents understand this, is because you said you're having this conversation based upon his disposition.
Yep.
Now, there might be another 15-year-old boy who there's no way in the world their parents should let them go away alone on a co-ed thing, because they have proven themselves based that this idea of raising self-governing children, it's going to be different for every child. And as parents, we have to recognize that and not bow down to our child's pressure of, well, you let little Johnny go and do it. Yeah, well, that's because I trust little Johnny, and you're a jerk, and there's no way I'm going to let little Billy go do that same thing.
Well, yeah, and it's
so other than the jerk part, that's where you're able to look at. I know there's an element.
I don't think I would have actually called little Johnny a jerk.
Correct.
I don't have a little Johnny, but like hypothetically, that's what would have gone through my mind.
But there is that element of, why does somebody get to do something? And it says, because I trust you, because I can trust them. And it goes back to that disposition. And that's what I've had that conversation with my boys. I was like, well, you're mean in this situation. You've been mean to them. So I can't trust you to make the right decisions.
Right.
And so using that kind of language, saying, I see this spitefulness, I see this anger, and I've told them this is why he gets to do these kinds of things, because he doesn't display that. I don't
Right.
have that concern. And it is fair because this one has earned my trust. And I think parents, again, they view fair as everybody gets the same thing.
Yeah.
That is not the fair thing. That
No,
is
that's socialism.
yeah,
Yeah.
that is not that's
There's no
not
communism in my home.
yeah. So when you look at how do I operate with the children, this is why, as we've in so many times said, as parents, if we lack that virtue, we're not going to know how to act well within our own lives, and you're definitely not going to know how to make good decisions on the case of your children.
Yeah.
So this is why, in terms of discernment, in terms of learning how to judge, in terms of even operating with the right definition, that if you have the wrong idea of fairness, that's going to influence how you're going to parent, and you're going to parent most likely in the wrong way because you're operating with a flawed definition.
Yeah.
So part of that becomes why, as a parent, learning what is true and learning what is good, and as you have that, you do, in a sense, gain a sense of how to operate with those kids.
Right.
And
I want to point something out, because you're talking about your 15-year-old son who
Mhm.
turns 16 relatively soon, correct?
mid-year,
So yeah, a couple of months, and your son isn't allowed to date.
correct.
So, and I'm further along in this parenting process with older children, and I didn't allow my children to date till they were 16. Like
Mhm.
that was a hard and fast rule, and I would have extended it if I thought I needed to. But when I say I didn't allow them to date, we didn't even play the she's got a little boyfriend, or like we never
Mhm.
even let them pretend to even have to deal with those grown up feelings,
Mhm.
because they're ill suited, ill prepared to do that. And so some people thought I was way too strict because there was no way they would even have the conversation about having a boyfriend. They didn't do it behind my back. Like we were pretty open about it. And so when 16 rolled around, now they're finally allowed to even start dealing with the emotions and situations that come about.
Mm-hmm.
We moved to, my 21-year-old, and we talked about this a little bit, but moved my 21-year-old who's engaged, but she's so self-governing at 21 that she won't even put herself into a position where others might think there's impropriety
Mhm.
before marriage. Like she's very, 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 like she handles it well. And I'm not saying this because I don't let her date till she was 16. That's not the reason. I mean, there was
Mhm.
obviously a lot more that goes into it. But one of the things that did contribute to it is the feelings and ideas of liking and loving and all of the things that these young minds have to deal with now that they're ill-suited to
Yeah.
do
Mhm.
wasn't even on the table.
Mhm.
So you could have called me a helicopter parent for a portion of that, but really it's not helicopter parenting, and personally I think it's good parenting.
Well, yeah, because you think about that, puberty hits earlier, and those emotions come, and it comes with this fiery, like hormonal kind of charge. These kids are just thrown into this because they're now something. It's a completely brand new set of emotions and interests.
Right.
And I think 16 is like, if it's average, like, between, like, for a girl maybe 9 and 13, they go through that process. Now she has 3 years of really trying to like kind of gauge this and have these emotions and regulate them. So then when she gets to the point where she's allowed to do that, she's not going to go over the top. And that was the problem when I was a kid, because like I just didn't have anybody tell me, well, I had no mentor or somebody telling or explaining to me, like, don't fall head over heels for this girl. You're too young for it. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into.
Mhm.
I do it because that's just what I did.
Sure. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like, you go, the girl gets bored with it. and she leaves, and then I'm devastated, and I go through a lot of emotional turmoil because I didn't know how to handle those emotions the way I ought to.
I was right there too at an age that there's no reason I should have been
Yep.
dealing with the thoughts that were coming
Oh,
through my
man.
head at such a young age.
And I think it's worth mentioning. I reserve in the concept of helicopter parent is when you're hovering when you shouldn't be. And like kind of what you're doing and what I'm doing, I don't view that as the helicoptering. We are regulating, we're parenting.
Yeah.
Well, I know, but the reason I said that, I'm not saying that you were doing that, but the reason I said that is because as I was raising my daughters,
Mhm.
there were people who thought I was an absolute monster with some of the things.
Right. They
Because
would
I
call
was-
you the helicopter parent, but
because I
I'm
was-
saying that you were not.
Right.
You
I
were
was
just
very
simply
strict
parenting.
about certain
it was-
things,
Yeah.
but I was very not strict about other things, right? And
Mhm.
my kids are like my daughters are very well rounded. Like they're very well rounded. They're doing very well, and they are self governing. Now, do they make all the decisions I would make? I don't know. Probably not. I don't know every decision they make, but they're very well self governing. But it was because I did the parenting and the thinking for them when they needed me to. I let them fail when they should have. I picked them up every time they failed and let them sort through, and when they couldn't sort through it themselves. And then I just walked with them through
Yeah.
their childhood.
That's good.
So I think as a visual, like if you've ever seen the potter's wheel where they're shaping the clay, that you've got to shape it. You've got to, in that sense, mold it. And there's times to apply pressure and there's times to let go. And that's
that's
what
good.
creates that shape.
Yeah.
That if you're constantly putting in that pressure and we have a true helicopterness, you're going to distort the thing that you're trying to make.
Yeah.
You're
Mhm.
not going to make it. And if you're hands off, it will
Just wobble everywhere.
yeah, it's going to deteriorate. So there's a skill, and this is why even when it comes to pottery, you sort of learn it, but you have to learn the feel of it.
Yeah.
You literally have to, as you're making this, learn the feel and get the sense of it. There is that sense. That's kind of what happens in parenting.
Yeah.
And there's some sense, when my wife and I, like with our oldest, you're like, maybe we'll figure it out by the time our youngest is an adult, and that's a word of encouragement to the
Yeah.
parents that
Yeah.
it is a practice. We can almost, to switch my metaphors, doctors are always practicing medicine.
Yeah.
They're never getting it right every time. There's always each case you've got to deal with, and sometimes doctors get it wrong.
Yeah.
I
And
wanna
that's
go-
the same thing with parents.
Can I go back to the potter's wheel? I've done a lot of pottery. Like, I don't know if you guys know that about me, but I've done a lot of pottery.
We're learning
That's
that
right.
side.
That's one of those random things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done a lot of pottery. And what's interesting about that, it's a great metaphor because what's interesting about it is you go into it and you're like, you think you have it pictured exactly what you're going to make. But then as you're shaping the clay, sometimes it just doesn't want to quite do it, what you want it to do. And so you end up letting the clay at some point kind of work its way into something else that also ends up being absolutely beautiful, but maybe not have been what you thought
That's interesting.
you were
That's
sitting
good.
down on that wheel to make that day.
Mhm.
Sometimes you're going and the lip gets a little funny and you end up having to like just kind of cut some of the clay off the top and just reshape it. And I mean, it's a great metaphor because as parents, I think that's exactly what we should be trying to do. And
Yeah.
sometimes the clay kind of gives us some feedback into it needing to be something that maybe it's not what we thought that would be, but it still ends up being like an incredibly beautiful
It's the
Mhm.
idea
pot,
of,
vase,
of an
cup, plate.
like an artisan. Like I with the bread, I would do the same thing. You want uniformity, but there is this sense where like when you're cutting the bread, so you shape it when it bakes up, and it, like when you pull it out of the oven, they all look similar, but there's this like the beauty of it is that they're all a little distinct and they all have their own character.
Yeah.
And I think that's what even when you're talking about, like I have this idea of it, but my idea is not always the best. I want to see like what the clay has to say about this, like your kid and their uniqueness. So you don't want them to be like a clone or a complete duplicate of yourself. But as you're parenting them, you're allowing them to explore who they really are with the sense that they are. You guys are blood related to as well.
With that constant pressure
yeah,
and
it's so cool.
feedback
A
and
great
shaping.
example. Great example.
Yeah, I'm probably that metaphor is gonna have some legs and be
Yeah, I
used
think so.
quite a bit. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate the conversation as always. You can find us on familiesofvirtue.com and our podcast Virtuous Roots on all major streaming platforms. Be blessed, and we'll talk to you next time.